Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something I think a lot of us feel.
Yeah,
Just being overwhelmed.
absolutely. Too much going on.
Yeah, exactly. So we've looked through a bunch of writings about this philosophy called essentialism, and the goal, really, is to figure out how focusing on, the vital stuff can actually lead to better results and maybe a more fulfilling life.
It's a contrast to that feeling of being stretched thin, constantly juggling too many commitments.
Right. So what's the core idea we're pulling out here?
Well, at its heart, essentialism suggests something pretty powerful. The wisdom of life isn't about cramming more in. It's actually about stripping away, eliminating the non-essentials.
Okay, taking things out.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And we'll look at what that means in practice using examples from, well, individuals and even whole companies.
And for you listening, if you're trying to grasp complex ideas quickly, thoroughly, without getting completely bogged down, this essentialism framework might just be what you need.
Yeah.
It's about prioritizing, doing less to achieve more, essentially. Okay, so where do we start? This non-essentialist trap. What does that look like?
Well, there's a really vivid story about Linang Sam Elliott in Silicon Valley. His company gets acquired, right?
Okay.
And suddenly he feels this immense pressure to say yes to everything. He wants to be the helpful guy, the team player.
Oh, this is familiar.
Yeah, but his days just turn into this whirlwind, rushing from meeting to meeting, call after call. He ends up feeling completely scattered, totally drained.
Wow. Yeah, that's exhausting just thinking about it. It sounds like a cycle.
It is. You get this reputation, oh, he's the go-to person.
Right, always available.
Which leads to more options, more demands, more requests, and the result, your efforts get spread thinner and thinner.
So you're distracted from where you could actually make the biggest difference.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Success, ironically, can actually undermine your clarity. It clouds your judgment about what's truly important.
It reminds me of that analogy of the cluttered closet.
Oh, perfect analogy. Yes.
You accumulate all this stuff, maybe with good intentions,
I might wear this someday.
but there's no system for getting rid of anything, no expiration date on these commitments or these clothes. It just becomes clutter, overwhelm.
And often that happens because we haven't actively chosen. We haven't said, this is essential, that isn't. When we don't choose, well,
Others choose for us.
others choose for us, or circumstances do. The writings mention someone who sort of drifted into law school,
Really? Kind
just
of.
following that vague advice, keep your options open. Didn't really choose it, just ended up there by default.
Gosh, that feeling of not really being in the driver's seat,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. And it can lead somewhere darker, can't it? Like learned helplessness.
It can, yeah. The sources bring up those famous experiments, the ones with the dogs.
Right, where they stop trying to escape the shock.
Unpacks. Exactly. Even when they could escape later, they didn't try. They'd learned their actions didn't matter. Or think of a kid struggling with math who just gives up entirely.
Believing they just can't do it.
Yeah, they internalize that feeling of powerlessness. Giving up the power of choice becomes ingrained. It's a really dangerous trap.
Okay, so that's the trap. Pretty clear how easy it is to fall in. Let's shift to the antidote. The essentialist mindset. First up is discern. What's the key here?
Discernment in this context is really about one core skill, telling the difference between the vital few and the trivial many.
The vital few.
Essentialists basically believe almost everything is non-essential noise.
Wow, that's a radical perspective shift for most of us. We feel like everything is important.
Yeah.
So how do they actually do that, make that distinction?
Well, they use really tough criteria, and they often lean on principles like the Pareto principle.
The 80-20 rule.
Exactly, dissecting what 20% of my efforts are producing 80% of the results, and then focusing ruthlessly on that 20%. Joseph Duran's work in quality control, especially in Japan after the war, he really showed how focusing on that vital few, identifying the few key causes of the vast majority of problems, could create massive improvements.
So find the high-leverage activities and double down on those. How does the closet analogy fit back in here?
Right, so instead of asking, could I maybe wear this someday, the essentialist asks much harder questions.
Like what?
Do I absolutely love this? Do I look great in it? Do I actually wear this often?
Okay, much stricter.
And you translate that to your work or life choices. Will this specific activity make the highest possible contribution towards my most important goal right now? Not just a contribution, the highest.
That's a demanding filter. And there was also that killer question for things you're unsure about getting rid of.
Yes. When you're hesitating about ditching something, could be a project, a commitment, even an old sweater, ask yourself this. If I didn't already own this, how much would I actually spend or sacrifice to acquire it today?
Ah, that detaches you from the past investment, the sunk cost.
Exactly. It forces you to evaluate its current value objectively. Because the truth is, you can't do it all. There are always trade-offs.
Always. The sources mention Continental Airlines and their Continental Light venture as a kind of warning. What happened there?
Yeah, that was a classic case of trying to straddle two different worlds. They wanted to be a full-service airline and compete with low-cost carriers like Southwest.
Trying to be both.
Right. But they didn't commit fully to the low-cost model. They cut fares, but kept many of the higher operating costs. So Continental Light ended up being super expensive to run, lost a ton of money, and confused customers.
Because they didn't make a clear choice. Didn't embrace the trade-off.
Precisely. Essentialism demands that you choose. You can't be excellent at two fundamentally different things simultaneously. Half-hearted efforts lead to mediocre results in both.
That's a powerful lesson.
Yeah.
But there was also a really positive example of making tough trade-offs based on values. Johnson & Johnson during the Tylenol crisis.
Absolutely. That was 1982. Horrifying news, cyanide-laced Tylenol capsules killing people. Johnson & Johnson's response was immediate and decisive. Customer safety was paramount. They pulled all Tylenol, their most profitable product, off every shelf nationwide.
Despite the massive cost.
Huge cost. But it was driven by their company credo, putting customers first. And that decision, that clear prioritization of values over short-term profit, ultimately saved and even strengthened the brand long-term.
It shows the power of having those core principles to guide you when things get incredibly difficult. The author Jim Collins also faced a big trade-off, didn't he?
He did. Peter Drucker, the management guru, basically told him, Jim, you got to choose. Build a great, enduring company. Or develop great, enduring ideas. You probably can't do both supremely well.
Wow, what a choice.
Collins chose the ideas. He focused on research and writing his books, which have obviously had immense impact. His own company stayed relatively small, but his ideas reached millions. A clear trade-off.
Making these deliberate choices is key. But it feels like you need space, actual time to think, to even see what the right choices are. Which brings us to escape.
Yes, exactly. Discernment doesn't happen effectively when you're constantly reacting, rushing from one thing to the next. You need solitude. You need space. Picasso said it right. Without great solitude, no serious work is possible.
And the writings gave an example, Frank O'Brien's company.
Yeah, Conversations, his marketing services firm, he did something pretty radical. One Monday every month, the entire company had an escape day.
The whole company. What did they do?
Nothing scheduled. No phones allowed, no email, no agenda, just space to think, to read, to talk, to reflect.
First Monday of the month, just offline. That takes guts.
It does. But O'Brien realized his team couldn't distinguish the essential from the noise without that dedicated space. It's like that other story, the leader who stayed 5 years too long at a job.
Why?
Because he was just too busy doing the job to ever step back and think about whether it was still the right place for him. He never created the space for that perspective.
It feels so counterintuitive, step away from the work to be better at the work.
Yeah.
The D School at Stanford was mentioned too, creating physical spaces for this.
The Hasso-Plattner Institute of Design. They deliberately design their spaces to encourage different kinds of thinking. No rows of desks, lots of movable furniture like foam blocks, quiet corners, dedicated maker spaces. It's all about fostering an environment for exploration, breaking free from conventional thinking patterns.
And this idea of focus in essentialism, it's not about just staring intently at one single point, is it?
No, not at all. It's more like how our eyes actually work. They don't just fixate. They constantly scan, adjust, take in the whole field. Essentialist focus involves exploring broadly first, creating that space to see options before deliberately narrowing in on what truly matters.
The sources had some, well, pretty intense examples of creating that space, like the executive checking into a motel.
Right. 8 weeks in a motel room with no internet access just to finish a critical project. That's extreme, obviously.
Definitely.
But it highlights the value placed on uninterrupted concentration for high-level thinking. Think about Isaac Newton during the plague years.
Right, hiding away.
2 years in near isolation. That period was absolutely fundamental for his work on the Principia Mathematica. He said he just thought on it continually. He had the space.
So creating that space is vital, even smaller things, like blocking out time each day. You mentioned your own writing routine.
Exactly. Just having those protected hours free from the constant ping of emails or meeting requests allows for that deeper work. And you see this with lots of successful people. Jeff Weiner at LinkedIn.
What did he do?
He literally scheduled blocks of blank space into his calendar every day, up to 2 hours, just for thinking, processing, strategizing, no agenda, just buffer time.
And Bill Gates' Think Week, of course.
The classic example. Twice a year, total isolation, just reading, thinking big picture. But
Yeah.
you don't need a whole week. The sources suggest even mini think weeks.
How would that work?
Maybe just starting your day with 20 minutes reading classic literature, something that pulls you out of the immediate demands and broadens your perspective before the day even starts, creating small pockets of escape.
Okay, so you've carved out space with escape. Now comes C. This is about how essentialists perceive the world around them.
Yeah, it's about consciously filtering what you pay attention to. There's so much information coming at us. It's about disciplined scanning and filtering out the noise to spot what's truly essential.
Like Thomas Friedman, the columnist.
Exactly. He listens differently. Even in casual chats, he's trying to hear what isn't being said, asking targeted questions, looking for the underlying connections others might miss.
It's about a deeper level of observation. The crash of that Eastern Airlines flight, 401, was mentioned as a tragic failure to see.
A really stark example. The whole crew got completely fixated on a single minor problem, a burnt-out landing gear light.
Just a light bulb.
Right. And in focusing so intently on that one small thing, they completely missed the big picture. The autopilot had accidentally disengaged, and the plane was slowly losing altitude.
Oh, wow. Hyperfocus on the non-essential led to disaster.
It illustrates the danger perfectly. You have to see the whole landscape, not just one tree.
So how do we get better at seeing the bigger picture? Journaling came up.
But again, with that less but better essentialist approach, don't just document every detail of your day. Try to capture the headline. What was the main theme? What patterns are emerging over time?
Looking for the signal in the noise.
Exactly. Brief, consistent reflection can reveal really significant insights you'd otherwise miss.
And it's not just about looking inward. Getting out into the field is crucial too, right? Like Jane Chen's team designing those baby incubators.
Yes, that was critical. They didn't just sit in a classroom assuming cost was the main issue. They went to Nepal. They saw the reality.
What did they find?
They found that 80% of babies were born at home in rural villages with no electricity. That completely changed their understanding. The problem wasn't just the cost of traditional incubators, it was their unsuitability for the actual environment. That insight led to a totally different, much more effective solution.
Wow. So you have to see the context, the reality on the ground. The sources also mentioned looking for the unusual, the abnormal detail. Miriam Salmon, the journalist.
Right. She talked about really digging deep into a topic, understanding the whole spider web around it, and then looking for the threads that don't quite fit, the anomalies. That's often where the real story lies. Seeking out a different perspective is key.
In that meeting example, going from motion sickness to momentum.
Yeah, that illustrated how cutting through the rambling and refocusing everyone on the core goal, the essential question, the necessary decision, can completely transform the energy and outcome, getting clarity on what you're trying to see or achieve.
Okay, so it's about focused observation, filtering, seeking context. Now, something that sounds maybe less intense, play. Why is play essential?
Well, it sounds less intense, but it's profoundly important. We tend to dismiss play, especially as adults, right? It seems trivial, maybe even irresponsible when there's real work to do.
Yeah, stop playing around.
But Stuart Brown's research, looking into people's play histories, shows something amazing. Play isn't trivial at all. It boosts health, strengthens relationships, improves learning, sparks innovation. It seems to directly impact brain plasticity, our adaptability, our creativity. As Brown puts it, nothing fires up the brain like play. It's fundamental.
So it's not just fun, it actually makes us better. What about play in the workplace? The easy button example.
Right. Those little things, a Staples easy button on a desk, a poster from a children's book, maybe some fun desk toys. These seem silly, but they push back against that non-essentialist idea that work must always be serious and solemn.
They inject a bit of lightness.
Exactly. They can spark creativity, remind us of the joy of exploration. It's a small way to signal that playfulness is valued.
So how do we, as busy adults, bring play back into our lives if we've lost touch with it?
Stuart Brown suggests looking back. Mind your past for play memories. What did you love doing as a kid? What brought you pure, unadulterated joy?
Okay. Building forts, riding bikes.
Whatever it was. Then ask, how can you bring a little bit of that spirit, that activity back into your life now, even in a small way? It's recognizing play isn't just for kids, it's a core human need.
That's a really nice thought. Okay, shifting again to something often sacrificed, sleep. Why is this framed as protecting an asset?
Because that's exactly what it is. Sleep isn't downtime. It's critical maintenance for our most important asset, our brain and body. The writings mention Jeff's personal experience with burnout.
Right, pushing himself too hard.
Relentlessly. He thought a short vacation would fix it, but he crashed completely for weeks. It showed him firsthand the serious cost of chronic sleep deprivation. It's not sustainable.
It really goes against that hustle culture idea, doesn't it? Where lack of sleep is almost a badge of honor.
Totally. We need to flip that script. Sleep isn't laziness. It's a biological necessity for peak performance. Look at Anders Ericsson's research on expert violinists.
What did he find?
The top performers didn't just practice more, they practiced more intensely and they slept more. Mastery requires focused effort and deliberate rest. They go hand in hand.
And the impact of sleep loss. It's actually measurable, right?
Oh, definitely. Studies show that being even moderately sleep deprived impairs your cognitive function as much as being legally drunk.
Wow. That puts it in perspective. We wouldn't praise someone for working drunk.
Exactly. So why do we praise sacrificing sleep? The stigma has to go. Prioritizing sleep is a strategic choice for higher contribution. Even top CEOs are talking about it now, and some companies are starting to create policies to support healthy sleep.
Protecting the asset. Makes sense.
All right.
Okay, next principle. Select. This is about the choices we make.
Yes, and applying extremely selective criteria. The sources talk about the 90% rule.
The 90% rule.
Basically, when evaluating an option or opportunity, if it doesn't feel like a 9 out of 10 or even a clear yes, then it should be an automatic no.
That's a high bar. Most things probably fall in the 6-8 range.
They do. And that's the trap. We settle for good enough. The 90% rule forces you to hold out for the absolutely natural fit, the things that are truly outstanding.
It must mean saying no a lot more often, even to decent opportunities.
It absolutely does. It requires discipline. But it prevents you from getting bogged down by mediocrity and saves your energy for the truly great opportunities. Think about Vito's hiring process.
That's what's so special about it.
Incredibly rigorous. Multiple phone screens, full workday trials, deep questionnaires, even a Lego test. They'd rather be understaffed than hire someone who isn't a 9 or 10. Extreme selectivity.
Or Aaron Levy at Box, his simple question. Is this someone I want to work with every single day?
It's about having those clear, tough criteria. Saying no to the good allows you to pursue the truly great. The writings even offer a simple process. Write down the opportunity, list your essential criteria, and score it. If it's not hitting those high marks,
It's a no.
it's a no.
Which leads right into eliminate, because identifying isn't enough.
You have to actually do the cutting.
Exactly. Back to the closet. You've decided what goes, but now you actually have to bag it up and take it out. This is where overcoming that sunk cost bias is crucial.
Because we overvalue what we already own or are involved in. Right. Whether it's stuff or commitments, it feels harder to let go, even if it's not serving us anymore.
So that killer question comes back again.
Yes, but applied to activities. If I weren't already doing this, how much effort would I expend to get this opportunity now? It helps you see its current value more clearly.
And having a clear, essential intent is key here too, for teams or individuals.
Absolutely vital for elimination. If you don't know precisely what you're aiming for, what's truly essential, how can you confidently cut away the rest?
Because without that clarity, you get, what, politics, diffused efforts.
Those are the two big patterns, yeah. Either people start playing games because the real goal isn't clear, or energy gets scattered across too many sort of important things. A good essential intent needs to be inspirational, yes, but also concrete and strategic. It guides the no.
Which brings us neatly to dare. The courage to actually say no.
Often the hardest part. It takes courage, and the sources emphasize doing it with compassion. But it's powerful. Think of Rosa Parks.
The monumental no.
A no that changed history. On a smaller scale, Stephen Covey choosing his daughter's special date night over a business dinner, daring to say no to protect what mattered most personally.
And counterintuitively, people often respect that clarity, don't they?
They really do. Peter Drucker apparently had a huge wastebasket just for invitations he deemed non-essential. He was ruthless about protecting his focus.
So think about the trade-off. What are you saying yes to by saying no?
Exactly. And recognize that long-term respect often comes from focus and conviction.
No repertoire.
Definitely. That awkward pause can work wonders. Or a simple, I'm flattered, but I'm not the right person for that. Or, my plate is full right now, I don't have the bandwidth.
Or even, okay, I can potentially do that, What existing priority should I drop to make room?
That's a great one. Puts the trade-off right back on the requester. Learning to jettison things, as one mentor put it, is a real skill. Saying no is its own leadership capability.
And what about things we're already committed to? Uncommitting.
That's part of DARE, too. Recognizing sunk costs again. Asking, if I weren't already invested in this project, relationship, whatever, how much would I invest now?
Like the Concord project kept going long after it was clear it wouldn't be profitable.
Classic sunk cost fallacy. Or the guy relentlessly trying to win an Xbox at a rigged carnival game. We get attached. Essentialists fight that. They use zero-based budgeting for their time and commitments. They pause before saying yes. They combat FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Okay, so we've discerned, escaped, seen, played, slept, selected, eliminated, and dared. Next up, edit. The invisible art.
Yeah, like film editing. A great editor makes the important stuff shine by cutting away everything else. Strict elimination.
Making tough choices about what stays and what goes.
Exactly. Not trying to cram it all in. Remember the root of decision to cut. Editing is about cutting the non-essential to reveal the essential.
It's about condensing, clarifying. Like Graham Hill choosing that tiny 420 SKU apartment.
Right. Deliberately editing his possessions down to the essentials to maximize meaning and minimize distraction. For us, it might mean editing our schedules, skipping non-essential meetings. Editing our communication being clear and concise. No is a complete sentence, right?
Right. And editing involves setting boundaries.
Crucial. The example of Lamont Jin-young planning her wedding while handling a huge board meeting. She set firm boundaries around her work hours to protect her personal life during that intense time.
And Clayton Christensen never working on Saturdays. That's a strong boundary.
A very strong, clear boundary. Boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're fences to protect your essential space and time. They're empowering. And learning to handle boundary pushers is part of it, realizing their urgency isn't necessarily your problem. Set the fences early.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Next, buffer. This is about preparation.
Yes, the power of planning for the unexpected. Think of Joseph in Egypt storing grain during the good years for the famine he knew was coming.
Planning ahead.
Because the world is unpredictable. Traffic jams happen, projects hit snags, people get sick. Buffers extra time, extra resources, contingency plans give you the space to handle surprises without everything falling apart.
Like leaving space between cars and traffic.
Perfect analogy. That little buffer prevents constant stressful stop-starts. Building buffers into schedules, budgets, even relationships reduces friction. It means preparing early and thoroughly. Don't just assume the best-case scenario.
Non-essentialists often underestimate how long things take.
Consistently. Essentialists build in slack. Think about Britain versus Norway with their North Sea oil revenue.
How do they differ?
Britain largely spent the windfall as it came in. Norway deliberately created a massive sovereign wealth fund, a huge financial buffer for the future, a very essentialist approach.
And the story of Amundsen versus Scott at the South Pole.
Classic preparedness versus hoping for the best. Amundsen prepared meticulously for worst-case scenarios. Scott's planning was less robust, more optimistic. Preparation, the buffer, made all the difference.
So practically, how do we build buffers?
Simple rule of thumb. Add 50% to your time estimates. Seriously.
Wow, 50%.
At least initially. Better to finish early than late. Also, do proper risk assessment for projects and identify the slowest hiker.
The bottleneck from the goal.
Exactly. Find the primary constraint, the thing holding everything else up, and focus your energy on removing that obstacle. Often, fixing the main bottleneck makes other problems vanish, and sometimes that bottleneck is interpersonal, requiring the catch more flies with honey approach.
Removing obstacles, creating space. Okay, now subtract. This sounds related to eliminate and edit.
It is, but with a focus on removing things to encourage positive outcomes, often in unconventional ways, like the Richmond Police Department in Canada giving out positive tickets.
Positive tickets for what?
For good behavior, rewarding kids for doing the right thing instead of just punishing the wrong thing. They subtracted the focus on punishment and added positive reinforcement.
And it worked.
Dramatically reduced youth crime rates. It shows the power of shifting focus, subtracting the negative reinforcement loop. It's also about celebrating small wins.
To build momentum, like Amabile and Kramer's research on the power of progress.
Precisely. Small, visible progress is incredibly motivating. Essentialists often start small, aim for minimal viable progress, and build from there, rather than trying a huge overhaul that fizzles out. Think about the Stanford prison experiment.
Showing how quickly negative conditioning can take hold.
Right. And Zimbardo's later heroic imagination project aimed to subtract that negativity and actively condition positive, heroic behaviors.
Like the token system for screen time versus reading.
Perfect home example. Subtract the friction for the desired behavior reading and add a small reward. Make minimal viable progress, visible use charts, trackers. Think iterative, like Pixar's storyboards. Small steps, constant refinement. Minimal viable preparation start early, small investments.
Leads nicely into routine. Automating the essentials.
Exactly. Making essential behaviors habitual so they require less conscious effort and willpower. Michael Phelps's pre-race routine is the ultimate example.
Physical and mental.
Meticulous. The same stretches, same music, same visualization, watching the videotape. It became automatic, freeing his mind to focus purely on the race. Routines conserve mental energy.
Our brains literally work less hard on things that are routine.
Charles Duhigg's work shows that. And routines don't stifle creativity. They can actually enhance it by freeing up cognitive resources. Many highly creative people have surprisingly rigid routines.
Got something Hallie found that.
But you have to watch out for counterproductive routines, like mindlessly checking email first thing.
Right. Need to deliberately install good routines.
Right.
Using that cue routine reward framework.
Yes. Identify the cue, consciously choose an essential routine to replace the old one, and make sure there's a reward. Tack new essential habits onto existing cues. Do the most important, most difficult thing first. Mastering routines is a long-term gift to yourself.
Okay, last principle, focus. Being present. The power of now.
Yes. Tuning out distractions and being fully engaged in the current moment. Larry Gelwick's, the rugby coach.
This question, what's important now?
Constantly bringing his players back to the immediate task. Forget the last play, don't worry about the final whistle yet. What needs to happen right now? It kept them unified and executing effectively. Focus on your own game, not the opponent's. There's a difference between losing and being beaten.
It's about tuning into kairos, the quality of time, not just chronos, the clock time, the mindful lunch experiment.
Yeah, just focusing entirely on the act of eating made it a richer, more satisfying experience. Think of Jiro Ono, the sushi master. His effortless skill comes from decades of complete presence in his craft.
Being present in mind, not just body, even in conversations.
Absolutely. This Nut Han writes beautifully about this mindfulness. The goal is to intentionally cultivate more of those fully present kairos moments throughout the day. It leads to higher quality work and, frankly, a richer life.
This has been fascinating, a real deep dive into thinking differently about our time and energy. So, quick recap. Essentialism is about choosing the vital few.
Deliberately, then eliminating the non-essential trivial many.
Ruthlessly.
Yeah.
And finally, creating systems routines, buffers to make doing the essential things almost effortless.
That sums it up nicely. And maybe a final thought for you listening. Just pick one area of your life right now where you feel stretched, thin, overwhelmed.
Okay.
What's one non-essential thing you could realistically let go of starting now just to create a bit more breathing room? Just one. And maybe what's the slowest hiker, the main obstacle in that area? What tiny step could you take this week to start addressing it?
Food for thought. This deep dive is really just scratching the surface, of course. We definitely encourage you to explore these ideas further and see how they might apply to your own goals and challenges.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for joining us today on The Deep Dive.